It was supposed to be a quiet afternoon out, a simple lunch between a mother and daughter at a small family-owned restaurant in New Hampshire. But what happened that day would stay with Karoline forever. As she watched the scene unfold, disbelief quickly turned into anger. Her mother, a kind and gentle woman, was being treated with blatant disrespect in front of a room full of strangers. Karoline's heart pounded. She realized in that moment that staying silent was not an option. Karoline stood up from her seat, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of injustice playing out before her eyes. The waitress, who had seemed friendly just moments before, now wore a smirk as she spoke in a condescending tone to Karoline's mother, questioning her accent and mocking her polite requests. It wasn't just rudeness. It was humiliation, coded in passive-aggressive cruelty. Other diners glanced over but quickly turned away, choosing discomfort over confrontation. That made Karoline even angrier. "I'm sorry, but what did you just say to my mother?" Karoline said, her voice cutting through the awkward silence. The waitress froze, caught off guard. "I didn't mean anything by it," she replied, still holding on to that smug smile. But Karoline wasn't having it. "She came here with me to enjoy her lunch. She deserves the same respect as anyone else in this room. And if you can't offer that, then maybe someone else should be serving tables." A hush fell over the restaurant. For the first time, someone had stood up and spoken out. Her mother looked up at her with a mix of pride and worry. Pride in her daughter's courage, worry about what might come next. Karoline gently reached for her hand and gave it a squeeze, as if to say, "I've got this." And in that moment, something shifted, not just in the restaurant, but in Karoline herself. The manager finally came out from the back, clearly sensing the tension that had filled the dining room like thick smoke. He was a middle-aged man with a neatly trimmed beard and a rehearsed smile, the kind meant to defuse rather than resolve. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, looking first at the waitress, then at Karoline. Karoline didn't hesitate. "Yes, your employee just humiliated my mother in front of everyone. And when I spoke up, she brushed it off like it was no big deal." The manager shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the other customers who were now very much paying attention. "I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding," he began. But Karoline cut him off. "No, it wasn't. I was right here. I heard everything. If you care about your business and the people who walk into this place, you should be taking this a lot more seriously." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It was firm, clear, and impossible to ignore. Her mother, still holding Karoline's hand, whispered softly in Vietnamese, "Con Kong can Phi Lam Lon Chuyen Dao." But Karoline turned to her and said gently, "Mi Kong Lam Gi Sai Ca."
Họ mới là người sai.
The manager, sensing that this wasn't going to be smoothed over with a fake apology and a free dessert, finally told the waitress to step aside. He offered a more sincere apology, though still hesitant and stiff, and said they wouldn't be charged for the meal. But Karoline wasn't there for a free lunch. She was there for dignity. As they walked out of the restaurant, Karoline pulled out her phone. Not to post anything, at least not yet, but to write everything down while it was still fresh in her mind. Every word, every expression, every bystander who looked away. This wasn't just about her mother anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been treated as less than in a space they had every right to be in. And somewhere deep inside her, Karoline felt something shift again. A quiet but powerful certainty. This is not the end of it. That night, Karoline sat at her desk, her laptop open, the cursor blinking on a blank post. For a moment, she hesitated. She wasn't someone who shared every part of her life online. But this felt different. This wasn't personal drama. It was something that needed light. Something too many people had experienced but stayed quiet about. She began typing. Today I watched my mother, a kind, soft-spoken immigrant woman, be humiliated at a local restaurant while people looked away. Couldn't. I won't. This is not okay. And if we don't speak up when we see this kind of treatment, it will never stop. She hit post before she could second-guess herself. By morning, the post had taken on a life of its own. Hundreds of comments, thousands of shares. People from all over the country began responding. Some shared their own similar experiences. Others expressed outrage. Some even named the restaurant, though Karoline herself hadn't. It didn't take long before local news outlets picked up on the story. Her inbox flooded with messages. Some supportive, some angry, and a few from people who had worked at the restaurant before, confirming that this kind of behavior wasn't new. But the message that struck her most came from a woman she didn't know. Thank you for standing up. My daughter saw your post and asked me if I've ever been treated like that. I told her yes, and she cried. You reminded her that we're worth standing up for. Karoline sat quietly after reading it. She thought of her mother, sitting by the window that morning, sipping tea like nothing had happened the day before. That was her way, quiet strength. But Karoline was learning that sometimes quiet wasn't enough. The restaurant, now under pressure, issued a public apology. Felt polished, PR slick, too clean. Karoline didn't respond. She wasn't done yet. Podcast invited her to speak. Then a campus group asked if she could come share the story at their event. Karoline had never imagined herself as an advocate, but maybe that's exactly what this was becoming. And in the middle of it all, one question kept circling in her mind. If this happened to my mother, how many other mothers are still being silenced? A few days later, Karoline sat alone in a small coffee shop downtown, her laptop open, a blank document staring back at her. She'd been invited to write an op-ed for a major newspaper. Something about her experience, the bigger picture, what it all meant. But every time she tried to start, she froze. She wasn't a writer. She wasn't a politician. She was just a daughter who'd seen her mother treated like she didn't belong. But maybe that was the point. She started typing. It didn't feel like a big moment at first. It felt like something small and ugly, like a splinter under the skin. But what I saw that day in the restaurant was something my mother had lived with for years. Something so many people live with quietly, politely, until one day it cuts too deep to ignore. She kept writing, not perfectly, not even confidently, but honestly. By the next morning, her piece was published, and within hours it was being shared by local leaders, civil rights groups, and even a few celebrities. People were starting to talk not just about the restaurant, but about the everyday ways dignity gets chipped away. And then came a message she didn't expect. A former employee from that restaurant. Someone who had worked there for 2 years, seen things, heard worse things, and quit in frustration. I read your story, the message said. If you're serious about making something happen, I'll talk. Karoline stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, let's talk. She didn't know where this was going, but she knew it wasn't over. Not even close. The former employee's name was Maya. She met Karoline at a quiet diner just outside the city, wearing a hoodie and no makeup, glancing around nervously before she spoke. They do this all the time, Maya said, stirring her coffee. Not just to customers, but to staff too, especially anyone who's not white or not from here. The owners know, but they look the other way. It's baked into the culture. Karoline listened, taking notes, recording with Maya's permission. She could feel the weight of it all, the stories, the silence, the years of looking away. With Maya's help, Karoline brought everything to a civil rights group already building a case against discriminatory practices in public-facing businesses. It wasn't just about that one restaurant anymore. It was systemic. And now there was documentation. When the formal complaint was filed, the story hit national news. The restaurant issued another apology, this time with lawyers and press releases. But it was too late. The damage wasn't to their image. It was to their foundation. A few months later, they quietly shut down. Karoline never celebrated that. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. In the months that followed, she continued to speak at panels, universities, advocacy events. Not because she wanted to be the face of anything, but because people kept telling her they finally felt seen. She helped launch a campaign called Respect Isn't Optional, focused on holding businesses accountable for how they treat marginalized communities. One evening, months after the first incident, she walked into a different restaurant with her mother. The staff was kind, the food was good, and no one looked at them like they didn't belong. As they left, her mother smiled quietly and said, "It feels different now." Karoline nodded. Not perfect, not fixed, but different. And sometimes different is how change begins.